Hey, it's all with another video, and today I'm going to take a look at the cool trinkets and weapons in patch 10.15 that might be worth killing for. I'll get to what I mean in a second, but if you could, hit the like button, subscribe for more coverage, catch me live, and let's first take a look at Time Rifts. Time Rifts are a new event in the patch that sums up to basically kill a lot of things and then jump into a portal and then kill a boss. While you do it, you're getting reputation and currency that you can save up to buy items from a group of vendors. The trinkets come in veteran class, meaning item level 424, which may not be very desirable if you've got regular access to higher tier content. What's great though is that Time Rifts can be hard farmed. You can just repeat this event over and over, hour after hour, for these paracausal fragments, that's the currency, and then buy these trinkets. So let's start things off with the healing trinkets. We're looking at the paracausal fragment of Sessional. This thing has a low chance to manifest a thing near your target's location that periodically restores health, split between you and all allies in your party for 15 seconds, and the sapling slowly dies. You can heal it up to extend its duration up to 30 seconds. Note the item level, it's only 402, seeing that it's only 1 out of 8 veterans, so don't pay too much attention to the numbers here. Questions that I have for myself are whether or not the sapling of life can be kept alive kind of indefinitely, as in can you maintain that 30-second duration, or can you only add 30 seconds on top of the 15 seconds, meaning that you only get 45 seconds uptime of this effect before it goes away until the internal cooldown is gone. At first glance though, it seems pretty cool. I mean, it's easy, it's passive, it does things, and there's a nice cool effect that kind of makes you think about what you're doing. But the paracausal fragment of Valandir seems even easier. This one gives your healing spells a chance to grant a blessing of Eternal Kings for 15 seconds, which makes your heals shield the target up to 10 times for a certain amount of damage, and that shield lasts for 8 seconds. So of course, this is a throwback to the legendary that we've seen in Ulduar that had an effect as well that gave a shield. Very cool. I think pound for pound, the Valandir trinket is just a lot better because, well, that's how bubbles are. Bubbles, they are, you always get the full effect from a bubble, but not so much from heal over time. So if you happen to get Sessional as a drop, great, but if you're choosing, I would say go for Valandir first and then maybe Sessional, unless you can get something better or if you have something better already. The paracausal fragment of Doomhammer, obviously a melee-based trinket. Your melee attacks and abilities have a chance to doom strike your target, dealing damage, but it also has an on use, which will do a 5-hit combo, dealing quite a bit of damage, but it'll also add that doom strike damage to this as well. So at least according to this looks like it's going to be like 150,000 damage during the on use, and then passively, well, it looks like you get some good damage out of it anyway for a pretty low cooldown of 1 minute and 30 seconds. I also want to point out that this is the Horde version of the trinket. The Alliance version will do pretty much the same thing. Paracausal fragment of Thunderfin, Humid Blade of the Tideseeker is hilarious. Your harmful spells and abilities have a chance to conjure a cyclone at your current target's location. It follows the initial target, it deals damage over 10 seconds, and it's split between all enemies. So very much a AoE kind of trinket. And here's more. While inside the cyclone, enemies become lightning conduits. Dealing damage to a lightning conduit has a very high chance to unleash a bolt of forked lightning, dealing damage split between them and up to 4 additional nearby targets. Now this one's cool. This one has every kind this one uses all the primary stats, so anybody can use this one. I think this is going to be like a really strong trinket for like Mythic Plus stuff, depending on how ultimately what the internal cooldown of this trinket is. The paracausal fragment of Azeroth is also for everyone, also kind of AoE based, but this more centers on stats and classes that can better take advantage of, in this case, high haste, because your harmful spells and abilities have a chance to manifest a fell elemental, or I guess an infernal maybe, by your side for 12 seconds, periodically dealing damage and increasing your haste by a fairly significant amount, much more significant if you power this all the way up to a 424. And then we have another melee trinket, the paracausal fragment of Sulphurous. In this case, your melee swings have a chance to deal fire damage. Your harmful melee abilities have a chance to make the trinkets erupt, I guess, which will deal some extra damage split between all nearby enemies. This one seems to lean more towards tanks, because the fragment also has a chance to react to your damage taken, counterattacking for about 9,000 damage. I think of the Onyx Amulet and how that had a lot of options to it, including some counterattack sort of damage, but it was pretty underwhelming compared to pretty much any other of the other Onyx Amulet combinations. I'm hoping that this trinket and others will at least perform a little bit better. And as a whole, with these trinkets from the time rifts, I'm a little bit disappointed that the item level of these is not very high. We only get veteran rank. It doesn't seem to go any higher. My hope, pure copium here, absolute speculation that comes from nowhere. My hope is that because we're getting this in 10.1.5, that at some point, maybe in 10.1.7, there's going to be a way to upgrade the class of these trinkets from veteran to hero or even myth. And that would be kind of an easy way to make an Onyx Amulet-like experience where there's going to be something cool that players will be able to work for and obtain that'll help them just have a good start in the next season. That would be very cool. I think that would be good feedback to give to the WoW team if they were even thinking about doing that. Alright, let's move on to stuff that comes from the Dawn of the Infinite Dungeon. Now, I want you to keep in mind that the class of this gear is Hero class. It's 4 out of 5. You just need one Aspect Crest in order to upgrade these to a 441. Now let's also put things in perspective. As this dungeon is being introduced for the first time, it's probably going to be a little bit on the tougher side. There's also no heroic version, no mythic plus version that's going to come out, so some of you folks may be turned off from this gear, or you might be like, okay, this is the stuff that I really want to get, or even, shucks, it's not even mythic plus stuff, forget about it. But in patch 10.1.7, we can expect this dungeon to be split into 2 heroic pieces. So folks might be interested in what kind of special trinkets and weapons are going to be here anyway, when they do get access to it. And then of course, when Mythic Plus rolls around, some of these weapons and trinkets might be the thing that you definitely want to go for when that occurs. So let's take a look, starting with this Accelerating Sandglass. This gives your attacks to drain the hourglass, giving you a chance to gain 100 haste up to 100 times. That's like 10,000 haste before the sand runs out. Once the glass is empty, your next offensive ability performs a flurry of accelerated strikes, dealing a bit of damage per stack, which means 100 times that number, and then flipping the hourglass to begin the cycle anew. Since there's no specification on whether it's melee or ranged, I'm hoping that both roles are able to use this. Part of me thinks that depending on what the internal cooldown of building these stacks are, that the best use of this trinket, or the trinket is going to be at its most powerful maybe after around 50 or so stacks when you have a tremendous amount of haste. So it's going to feel kind of weird when you get the maximum number of stacks and then you do your big attack, but then you just don't feel great for a while because now you feel really slow. The Echoing Tearstone, a clear healing trinket. It's an on-use where when you use it, it records 30% of your healing done over the next 10 seconds, up to a pretty decent amount, and that has a 2-minute cooldown. It also has a passive though. Whenever you or one of your allies falls below 35% health, the Tearstone will summon an echo of your past self, healing them and nearby allies for the stored amount that you had been storing when during the on-use, I guess, and it grants 225 haste, or a certain amount of haste, for 15 seconds before the record is lost. So it's kind of cool because the on-use, it doesn't immediately take that certain amount of healing, it just kind of banks it for you, and then when a rainy day comes, like if the tank goes low or if you go low, then it'll automatically activate and all that healing is done to you on demand. So at least that heal is, well, for the most part, never wasted. The kind of sucky part though is that haste bonus, you can't exactly control where that goes. The Mirror of Fractured Tomorrows is a trinket for everyone. It's an on-use with a 3-minute cooldown. That part kind of sucks, but you gaze into the mirror's depths, inviting a version of your future self to fight alongside you for 20 seconds, casting spells based on your role. That part doesn't seem all that great, especially as a tank, but in addition, you grant yourself 3,000, or you grant yourself quite a bit of your highest secondary stat. That seems okay. I think this will be something that is definitely more for DPS than for any other role. 3-minute cooldown kind of sucks, and a lot of the encounters in the current raid aren't that long that warrants 2 uses of the trinket. Now again, the fact that this will eventually show up in Mythic Plus means that, hey, we might get longer encounters where a trinket like this may have a lot more use. The Prophetic Stone Scales is, by and large, a tank trinket. Gives you a cheat death, sustaining fatal damage. It throws you 10 seconds into the past, restoring up to quite a bit of health lost during that time. And then for the next 12 seconds, you get a bunch of haste and enemies do less damage to you. This effect can only occur once every 8 minutes, which is pretty typical for a cheat death trinket. This is a lock for pretty much every tank, starting from, well, when this patch comes out, all the way up to the end of Season 3, I bet. And even then, if there isn't a new cheat death trinket in Season 4, people are probably going to be using this still. And then we have Time Thief's Gambit. This is a caster trinket. It's a non-use where you borrow power from an alternate timeline for personal gain, increasing your haste by quite a bit for 15 seconds, and then triggering a paradox 2 minutes later. If the paradox arrives, you'll be frozen in time, completely unable to act or move for 5 seconds, but killing enemies steals their remaining time to partially delay the paradox by 15 seconds, with the major enemies restoring the timeline completely. So this is kind of like a, I don't know, kind of a kill streak kind of trinket, something that you probably want to use in Mythic Plus and not really anywhere else. Note that there's no passive, so if you're not able to really take advantage of the benefits of this trinket, then it's definitely a pass. But the way this kind of functions seems pretty interesting. Now, with only a 1 minute cooldown, you can just kind of keep using this trinket over and over, especially if you're in a dungeon. The only question I have is whether you need to deal the killing blow, or you just need to have tapped whatever enemy, or at least be a participant in combat. And then finally we have these divergent mythics, which have special effects and stats, which I'm not quite sure how useful they're going to be, but let me show you what's going on. Certain gear might have what's called Time Strike as a stat, and the only thing that we know about it at the moment is that it gives a chance to have some sort of added effect. We don't quite know what it is, whether it's a random ability or some sort of damage proc, we're not quite sure. Part of me is thinking it's going to be something that's not so different from good old multi-strike, if you guys remember that. But I'm not expecting too much from this, or actually any of the other stats, and well, let me just keep going down the list. Demon Bane is another one of the stats. You can see that it's here on Gorehowl. Well, it's very iconic, obviously. Let me just put it up on the screen so you guys can know what it looks like. But Demon Bane just seems to mean, well, it's just extra damage to demons. Does this mean that we will fight a lot of demons? I actually don't really think so. This happens to be the only weapon with Demon's Bane on it. So the effectiveness, I imagine, is going to be pretty similar to this one, Quells Aram, the High Blade of the Lion. Now this has a certain amount of Scourge Bane, which means, of course, this is going to deal some extra damage to undead. How often have we encountered undead? A little bit more often than we've encountered demons, but I just don't quite see the stat as being something that'll actually provide, very useful special effects that'll make us be like, oh yeah, definitely gotta get this. Of course, we don't know exactly what's going to happen in Season 3 or Season 4, if there's even going to be a Season 4, so we'll just have to wait and find out. And then we have these imbued Frostweave slippers. Now these are only cloth based, but they do provide spirit, which, well, it's spirit. This is meant to provide a little bit of mana. I think out of these divergent stats, the only one that seems even remotely useful would be Time Strike, because it seems to actually do things consistently. So while I'm not going to give too much attention to those special stats, I do want to take a bit more of a look at these two weapons here, Iridal, the Earth's Master, and the Infinite Hand. Actually, let's look at the Iridal weapon first. This is a staff, has an on-use with a 3-minute cooldown, and does a lot of damage as long as the enemy is in execute range, but also dealing damage to enemies that are in this execute range of 35% will reduce the cooldown of this effect by 1 second. So I feel like having this staff is going to be a must-have for just about every class outside of maybe Evokers and their legendary. While the extra damage is conditional, it is pretty much free damage, so hopefully if the haste and verse stats here are useful for you, then this is going to be a great weapon. The Infinite Hand, on the other hand, it doesn't seem nearly as useful. Now, as you can see, it gives movement speed and it gives your abilities a chance to deal bonus holy damage, although it only happens in certain areas, like Uldaman, which at the moment is part of the Mythic Plus lineup, but it's not going to be forever, Uldoras, which is technically the Halls of Infusion, and Uldaz. So, okay, it's a two-handed weapon that has its biggest effect in 2 dungeons in the current season, but then after this season, it's not good. I don't think this is going to be like a must-have, but don't get me wrong, it does look great. I would get it for the transmog alone. And right now, that is it, the trinkets and weapons that may be worth your time farming for in patch 10.1.5. Let me know if you have any favorites, if you're going to bother with these weapons and trinkets, and, well, your general thoughts. Of course, if you don't mind, leave a like, subscribe for more content, catch me live, and I'll catch you later. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.